بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين أما بعد فقد قال عز وجل بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أرأيت الذي يكذب بالدين فذلك الذي يدعو اليتيم ولا يحض على طعام المسكين فويل للمصلين الذين هم عن صلاتهم ساهون والذين هم يراءون ويمنعون الماعون. صدق الله العظيم. So last week we looked at Surah Quraysh, and just briefly from the beginning, from Surah Fil. Surah Fil, we spoke about how Allah protected the Quraysh, a blessing on the Quraysh. Then Surah Quraysh was specifically about the business of the Quraysh, more about the blessings which they are blessed with, which benefit them. And the Mufassirin described that as the jalb of the manfa'a, the bringing of the blessing for the Quraysh, whereas Surah Fil was the protection of the Quraysh. And now in this surah we find this is the third surah which we mentioned, all link into the Tafseer. So this is the third one, which Surah Maoon, and here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He starts almost describing the Quraysh. So before we had the blessing of the Quraysh, the benefits which Allah had put in store for the Quraysh, and here in the third surah it's a description of the attributes of the Quraysh. So the way this links with Surah Quraysh is that in Surah Quraysh we notice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He described His blessings on the Quraysh. He said, لِإِلَافِ Quraysh, the covenants of the Quraysh, the blessings of the Quraysh, and how they can travel in the summer and the winter and throughout the seasons, and how they can continuously, have caravans going for trade, and always so many blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Quraysh. And this is what He mentioned. Then after this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He then said, as a result of this, فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. This is something He said. So there was a demand for worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of these blessings, and there was a reminder of the blessings. Here we see the blessings are also mentioned, but also almost to go further, we notice that the fact that the Quraysh, they have so many blessings, but they don't give these blessings to the other people. So we'll come on to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this in the Arabic, but this is a summary of the surah. The Quraysh, they refuse to pass on the blessings. They're very rich and they're very powerful, but they don't give these blessings to the masakin. They don't help the orphans, and these are the two groups of people mentioned at the beginning of the surah. Also, another way it links in is that in Surah Quraysh we had what we call in English positive reinforcement. That positively they are made to recognize the benefits of Allah. Allah says, لِإِلَافِ, look at all the covenants, look at the blessings the Quraysh have, and look at how you can travel in the summer and the winter. And because of all these blessings, فَلْيَعْبُدُوا, make sure you worship Allah, because of the good things Allah has given you. Now, in this surah, we find more negative reinforcements. Allah says, أَرَأَيْتَ, look at these people, look what they're doing, how dare they do this. And وَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ, may halakat, destruction, punishment before these people. So in this surah, we see more of what we call negative reinforcement. If you don't do this, how come these people are doing these terrible things? So this is more of the theme of this surah. And also we notice that this surah, and from the beginning really, the main addressee have been the leaders of the Quraysh. The main problem for the Prophet ﷺ were the leaders. The leaders were refusing to change their ways. And we find that many a time the leaders are addressed in the Quran, and specifically in this surah, when we look at what the Mufassirin and the scholars say, many a time they mention specific incidents of the leaders of the Quraysh. There's different names, and there's so many of them that are mentioned. So to start with the first ayah, أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ, again addressing the Prophet ﷺ. أَرَأَيْتَ, this ta is going to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ is being addressed. He's being mukhatab, as we say. And he's saying, did you not see الَّذِي, that person, يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ, who denies deen? So the simple translation, didn't you see the person who denies ad-deen? Deen is translated in a couple of ways, but we'll leave that for now. So somebody's denying this. The Prophet ﷺ, attention is being drawn. And again, it's a question, just like remember at the beginning of Surah Fil, Alam Tara, did you not see? Same thing here, Ara'ayta, did you not see? There's a slight difference between how these two are used. When do we use Alam Tara? When does Allah use Ara'ayta? Alam Tara, if you remember Surah Fil, the Prophet ﷺ was being oppressed by the Quraysh. He was in almost a lower position. He was very sad, and he was almost trying to remotivate him. And then he says that, look how I helped the Quraysh, how Allah's help came. So then the Prophet ﷺ sees that when Allah wants to do something, He can destroy a whole army of elephants. He can do whatever He wants. He remotivates the Prophet. Here is different. Here in this surah, when Allah says Ara'ayta, it's not to remotivate the Prophet. It's more to almost to give the Prophet ﷺ the upper hand. He's almost looking down on these people. This is almost how this surah, the Ara'ayta used here. So there's a difference. One is Alam Tara, to use one way. One is Ara'ayta. They both translate as the past tense, but different ways have different meanings, and Allah sticks to this pattern. So alladhi yukadhibu bid-din, again it's a singular person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala using alladhi is one person, alladhina for more than one person. So referring to a specific individual, as we know, the Mufassirin have different people. As bin Wa'il is one of the famous ones who's being referred to here. But the first 3 verses, the Mufassirin say all 3 of them refer to the same kind of incident. That may be 4, 5, 6 separate incidents, but all the first 3 verses linked together to make that one argument against that one individual. So the first 3 verses were then revealed. So Ara'ayta alladhi, now although it refers to one individual, as you can see what's written, is that it can include a specific person, but it's not limited to that specific person. It can now expand to every one of us and every person within the Quraysh. So it's not limited to those individuals. And even today, if these qualities, أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ, if somebody who denies Islam, now if somebody brings this up in a lecture or in a speech, then if somebody is a criminal, he'll feel like he's being addressed. Sometimes when the khutbah is going on, or when somebody's been speaking about a certain issue, if we ourselves are lax in that specific issue, then very often we feel that the person speaking, the khatib, he's addressing me directly. And we see this is the same with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He talks about an issue, but He addresses and covers everyone. So yukadhibu bid-din, then yukadhib is very interesting. So it's not yakfur, it's not somebody who does kufr, it's not somebody who's not a Muslim, somebody so it denies. So kadhaba means to lie. So yukadhib means to make something else seem like a lie. Now this is why it's interesting, is because kufr would be to outright reject Islam and not be a Muslim. But here it's almost as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that I know you know. Because when yukadhib, it means that he's trying to make something seem a lie. So in his heart he knows what's right. In his heart he knows that there's really meant to be one God. It doesn't make much sense for there to be 360 different gods. So now in his heart he knows that. Now Allah says, I know what's in your heart, by using the word yukadhib, because he's lying almost to himself and to everyone else, because he's not telling the truth. If he was telling the truth, it would be kufr. He would openly tell everyone. But by saying taqdeeb, he has one thing in his heart, but then he lies against his own heart, and then he says that I disbelieve. This is almost one deeper meaning we get of yukadhibu. So the person, by lying, he says against what he actually believes. Because obviously if somebody believes in Allah, it means he has to come under all of the constrictions which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him, and therefore a person doesn't want to do that. So this is one thing which is understood. Also yukadhib is in the present tense, meaning that he continuously and repeatedly does taqdeeb and denies the religion. And deen itself, generally as we know, deen, a way of life, and after Islam came, deen would refer to Islam. Also deen can mean payback. When somebody has takes a loan, then to give that loan back also means deen. And from dana yadinu. However, instead of literally, not just the money can be deen. If somebody does something to you, then to give any form of payback could be referred to as deen. So deen, as we know, even in Surah Fatiha we done that Maliki Yawmiddin, and we all translate it as judgment, as the day of judgment or the day of Qiyamah, the day where judgment occurs, the payback happens, justice is served. Same here. So the day of deen here, again, it refers to judgment or hisab or accountability, and somebody who denies that, then this is the problem. So now the very first verse that we see here is a person who denies the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if a person denies Islam, or he mocks the Quran, or he mocks the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then that in itself is one problem. However, if deen refers to the Yawmul Qiyamah, and if deen refers to the hereafter, then when deen refers to that, then the person, by denying that, he denies himself of all accountability. He denies himself of anything which he has to do, and that has a knock-on effect. So we'll see that the next thing is a knock-on effect. So if a person denies deen, then a person, he'll find it easy to deny other things. He'll find it easy to be a criminal. He'll find it easy to do evil things. And give this iPhone. So this is something we find from this. So if you look on to the next verse, فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُ الْيَتِيمِ. So the first verse is when the person, he denies the fact that Qiyamah will happen. He denies the fact that he will have to be accountable. This is the first thing that happens. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, here we see the first word of the next verse is the fa. So فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي, so that is that person who يَدُعُ الْيَتِيمِ, who will then push around the orphan. So the fa gives us a lot of meaning. Fa in English is usually translated as so. We've done this in Surah Quraysh as well. So as a result of a person denying Islam or denying Qiyamah, now because of that, now he will become yadu'ul yatim. He will be the one pushing around the orphan. And this continues. So now the first thing is the cause of everything else. And this happens in many parts of the Quran. And we see, for example, in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا اكْتَالُوا عَلَى النَّاسِ يَسْتَوْفُونَ وَإِذَا كَالُوهُمْ أَوْ وَزَنُوهُمْ يُخْسِرُونَ. And then أَلَا يَظُنُّ أُولَٰئِكَ أَنَّهُمْ مَبْعُوثُونَ. So we have وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ. Anybody who cheats, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says wail, halakat for that person. And then أَلَا يَظُنُّ أُولَٰئِكَ أَنَّهُمْ مَبْعُوثُونَ. Do they not think that those are the people who will be mab'uth? They will have to come back to life. They will have essentially accountability. That's what mab'uth means. So a person has accountability. Here Allah starts with, as soon as a person denies accountability, then he'll do other bad things. In Wailul lil Mutaffifin, same thing. And so many other parts of the Quran. فَأَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى وَاتَّقَى وَصَدَّقَ بِالْحُسْنَى. So a person who a'ta, he gives and he has taqwa. And saddaqa bil husna, he does tasdeeq, he testifies to husna, to everything good which he's going to get. Now this person, when he says he accepts of qiyamah, he's going to get Jannah, then he does taqwa and he does all the good things. But another person, so this person, he has these good things. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this theme happens in many different parts of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He brings the fact that a person will believe in Akhirah and he'll do good things. If a person doesn't believe in Akhirah, he'll do evil things. This is the first verse that we have. A person has denied Akhirah, and therefore now we have a list of 2 or 3 things which happen. So the first verse, Yadu'ul Yatim. Yadu'u means to push away, to give away. Now we know a Yatim. Yatim generally means an orphan. And many of us may be older and we may have lost our parents. So we know losing parents is generally a very big thing. But if a child loses their parents, if any of us are parents, we know how much a child looks up to the father, needs the father, needs to have the parents. They're always wondering where the parents are. So an orphan is always weak. Now for somebody to then start pushing this orphan around, he has to have an extremely hard heart. And this is what Allah explains here, that when a person doesn't believe in Akhirah, he doesn't believe in accountability, the first person who a person can now oppress is going to be the yatim, because he has no protection, especially in the time of the Quraysh. So nobody's going to say, don't push the yatim around. The yatim can't afford a solicitor or a wakil, or has no protection. So then somebody who doesn't believe in Akhirah, there's nothing stopping him, nothing physical stopping him from now oppressing the yatim. This is why this is all the fa in itself. Fa means so because of this. So this is one thing that we know. So because yatim are generally the weakest form of people in society, they're unable to defend themselves. So this is why they will be oppressed by these kind of people. And also we missed out the word dhalika straight after the fa. So dhalika, it also has a meaning, as we know. Hada is for close, dhalika is for far. So when something's far away, and to indicate to it dhalika, even in English sometimes we use the word that to refer to something in a belittling way. In Arabic it's a lot more common. We won't fully understand it because it's not the same in English. But in dhalika, to refer to this فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي, it belittles that person. That person, how can a person even be so evil that he does such a thing? And also one more thing, is it follows on from the surah before. Last week in Surah Quraysh, all of the blessings of the food were there. لِإِيلَافِ قُرَيْشٍ. All seasons food the Quraysh have. Here we see that same food, Allah gave them that food. That blessing was from Allah. All these ilaf which they had were from Allah. Now this same food, they're now refusing to give it to the orphan. And they're not fulfilling the rights of the orphan. Many Mufassirin say that they actually oppress the orphans. So they go against the right of the orphans, and despite the fact that they're meant to be helping the orphans, they don't help the orphans. So this is the main message, and it follows on from the previous surah, like we mentioned at the beginning, that there's no help for the orphans. And this is the key message again, that it follows on. They have so many blessings, and from that many blessings, this is why the leaders are very much addressed, that the leaders have this responsibility and they oppress the orphans. And moving on to the next ayah, so أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُ الْيَتِيمِ. So this is on the back. وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. And the masakin and these leaders and the people of the Quraysh, وَلَا يَحُضُّ, they do not encourage عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ, feeding the poor people. So if there's somebody poor, the leaders of the Quraysh do not encourage them to be fed, or the one individual which has been referred to. Now there's different narrations. One very famous one which comes in most of the Tafseer kitabs is Abu Sufyan. Because there's a story that he used to, every week he used to slaughter a animal, and then he used to distribute the meat amongst his friends. But once an orphan came to Abu Sufyan, and he asked him for a small amount of meat, and he yadu'uhu, basically he pushed him away, and he some narrations say that he had a staff and he hit him with the staff. So this is one of the, so some people say that it was narrated specifically for Abu Sufyan, some say for other people of the Quraysh, Asib and Wa'il, but these first three verses come regarding this one person. This is what the Mufassirin say. So this is what he done, and generally the issue here is Yahuddu is to encourage other people. It's not specifically about what you do yourself. It's more about encouraging other people. Now, why is that a problem? That's a big problem with the leaders. So if somebody becomes a politician, for example, nowadays, now we may think of the last election, who we voted for, and the reasons we voted for them. It's the same with the Quraysh. If you choose to be the leader of the Quraysh, the whole of Makkah, and you have homeless people, people without food, and you choose to do nothing about them, and whenever you walk around or go for a tour of Makkah, then you always see the homeless people, you see the masakeen, you see the fuqara. But as a leader, they choose to do nothing. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tries to explain here. وَلَا يَحُدُّ, that they don't encourage any kind of action. And there's many reasons for this. The basic reason would be, imagine if there was a politician nowadays, and it happens today, one of our local MPs who said he's going to fight for to remove poverty. And imagine he was very rich, he was a millionaire, and then somebody came knocking on his door, and he had lots of houses, and imagine if then after making this claim, afterwards it was found that he had loads of houses which were in an area which were needed for the homeless people, and he was refusing to give them to the homeless people. So this would cause a problem for him. This is the same with the Quraysh. So if one leader of the Quraysh says that everybody should feed the poor, then the verse number 2 will come straight back at him, that he's the same person who is pushing the yatim away. He's the same person who's not looking after his own woman or his own children, and generally he's not nice to the poor people. So if he goes out in the public and says everybody should be nice to the poor people, then everybody's going to look at him and say, why aren't you nice to the poor people? So if all of the leaders then agree almost that none of us will say anything to anybody else, and this is how generally it works. So the leaders, they have to agree that they have to look after the rich people, because the rich and powerful are the people that get politicians into power. And then afterwards, because there's no benefit of having a poor person or looking after a poor person. So this is the whole way and the system which they would live, and this is the problem, because they take the responsibility of public service but they don't properly fulfill it, and this is basically the problem which happens, and they end up serving the rich people and the poor people are left aside. So this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يَحُدُّ, they tell nobody, they encourage nobody, they don't do it themselves, and forget doing it themselves, they don't even let other people do it. عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ, ta'am doesn't actually mean to feed, it means food. So translated as itam, the benefit of bringing ta'am is that it allows it to become mudaf of the next word. So when we say ta'am al-miskin, we say that the food belongs to the miskin. If you said it'am, feeding, it would mean that the person is, if I said I'm feeding Muhammad, then that would mean that I've got my food and I'm giving it to him. Yeah, but if I said ta'amu Muhammad, if I said Muhammad's food and he's eating it, then it all belongs to him. This is why the mention here, ta'amul miskin, the food is the miskins, but they have every right to it, and this is how society is meant to work. They're meant to have a welfare system in place. But despite that, despite them having every right to the food, they still deny them that food. So this is the message got across by bringing the word ta'am and by making miskin the owner of the ta'am as well, by the grammar in that language. So despite, and also it's miskin, it's wahid, it's not masakin, it's just one miskin. So Allah, the message given is that they don't even have the courage to even feed one miskin. Forget all of the fuqara and all of the poor people, even one miskin they can't feed. So this is the nuances which we find inside this verse. And this is the key thing that we know, because otherwise if a person goes around and starts calling other people to start feeding the masakin, then everybody will tell him that you need to practice what you preach. And then this would go back to the second verse where he's pushing away orphans and all of these. Almost the second verse is private. So if somebody comes knocking on your door and you push them away. But the third verse here, وَلَا يَحُدُّ, is the public life. Generally when you walk outside you see poor people, you see homeless people, and to do nothing about it, that's what the third verse refers to. So this is the issue that we see there. And obviously, again, the poor people, just like the yatims, they are generally helpless. They don't have much that they can do. This is miskeen, even sukan, if you look at that. But generally, the poor people, they can't do much. They can't do anything for themselves. They rely on the richer people. And in essence, if you deny them their right, there's not much they can do about it. Again, they can't afford solicitors, they can't do things. And again, all of this is a result of verse number 1. Verse number 1 was يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ. They deny the akhirah. So once you've denied the akhirah, then it will be easy for you. Essentially, a person will become hard-hearted. So then he'll see somebody being homeless, he won't want to give it to them. And we'll see this in the last verse, how hard-hearted somebody can become. So this is, according to many scholars, these first 3 verses are together, and the last 4 verses are together. But some scholars also say that all 7 verses are together about the Quraysh, and some say that these first 3 were specifically for the Quraysh, and the last 4 are for the Munafiqeen of Medina. But we can link it all together, and that makes a little bit more sense. So moving on, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is finished talking about oppressing the yatim, oppressing the masakin, and now we're talking about فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. Allah says, halakah, destruction be for the musallin, which is essentially quite a strange thing to say if we say that on its own, because musalli is a person who comes and prays the salah. So if you say فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ, halakah, destruction be for the musallin. So it's a very strange thing to say. However, Allah describes what's going to come afterwards. And this is essentially true in any language. I mean, the important thing is the description sometimes. And this Mufassirin, they mention this as well. So if I was just to say that, oh, there were some people walking past, there's nothing interesting. If I told you that people were walking past and banging drums and singing tunes, then it's a bit more interesting. So the interesting thing is actually the banging drums and the singing the tunes. Just the fact they're walking past is of no interest. It's the same thing here. So فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ, the fact they're musallin isn't really the main point. It's what they do after that. So Allah, by saying musallin, has some benefits as well. One is that first, when we say that, is that all of us sitting here, alhamdulillah, we are musallin. We just prayed salat al-dhuhr. So now this can apply to us. So now the thing coming, we can ask ourselves that, does this apply to me? This is the key benefit that comes for us. That فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ, does this specific quality which Allah is going to mention, does it apply to me or not? And then we can try and improve our own lives. This is one thing which happens by bringing it like that. This is the sunnah way of reciting, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ, and then we stop. Obviously you can't go into ruku at that point, and you can't stop reciting, because to complete the meaning you have to finish the surah. So الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ, those people who, when it comes to salah, they are sahun, they are lazy. Sahun, as we know, there's one big benefit of bringing an instead of fi. So if we were to think of sahun, it comes from sahwa, and we all know sahwa, sahwa, which sometimes we do. So if we make a mistake in our salah, we do sajda to sahwa, which is the sajda of a mistake, if we do a mistake. So sah can mean mistake. Now that would be correct if the sahun was fi salah, if it said alladhina hum fi salatihim sahun, because if a person made a mistake. But we know this isn't true. Allah would not curse somebody who does a mistake, because even the Prophet ﷺ, there's a narration where he does sajda sahwa. The Sahaba does sajda sahwa. So it's not wrong to do sajda sahwa or to do a sahwa fi salah. But the Arabic here is an salah, regarding salah. Overall, your overall mentality of salah is a sahun one, is a lazy one. You don't really care. And one thing which is very, very much repeated in the Mufassirin is they say that la yubali, they don't care about it. They have they're not bothered about the salah very, very much. This is the key thing that we see. And there's many, many different meanings of what does sahun actually mean. Sahun generally, from just a few key ones, one is to delay the time. So that when a person has a timetable, he never makes salah part of it. So today I'm going to go and, I'm going to open my business at this time, and I'm going to, go and start another business at this time, or I'm going to watch something at this time, or go out with my friends at this time. So you've planned the day out, but you've not actually planned the time for salah. So I need to, at 1:30 or 1 o'clock, I've got to do dhuhr and this. So this is one meaning of sahun. Another meaning is that when a person prays salah, he has no la yarju thawab. He has no hope of any reward. This is one thing. Another thing, he doesn't have any fear of the punishment. And there's many things which come, but generally as somebody who doesn't care much about salah. Salah is not that important in his life.
With khushu' one of them.
Khushu', yeah. So, okay, this is something which can happen. So, a person who doesn't have that much dhikr of Allah here, but that's a bit harsh if you say khushu', because then that means that this would apply to everybody who doesn't have 100% khushu. So we try not to say that. Some of us do mention that, but generally I wouldn't put that under this ruling, because it's quite a harsh punishment. So if a wail comes, so it will be un-salah to him. So your general perception of salah is that it's a bit of a waste of time. It's not something you should spend time on. And then obviously a person while in salah, he makes as much effort to improve his salah as much as he can. So that's the benefit of bringing an. And different scholars they mention the importance of bringing an, and this is a blessing of Allah. And Ata ibn Abi Rabah has mentioned it as is written down. And also this follows on. So now the first three were about the ibadullah. So does أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ, a person who denies the day of Qiyamah. فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي, he's somebody who will oppress the yatim and the masakin. Now we're talking about the rights of Allah himself. Before it was the rights of the masakin. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he talks about his own rights, which is to worship, that we have to worship him and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And generally we see this link, that how these two halves come together. One is that when a person is happy to oppress the ibadullah, is happy to oppress the yatim or the masakin, that kind of person will also find it easy to not pray. He'll also find it easy to be lazy with his salah and do these kind of things. That's one thing. Also, when a person doesn't pray properly, then we notice that his dealings with the people is also not as it's meant to be. This is another thing we see. And as we know in the Quran, that inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar, that salah saves a person from evil and fahsha and any immodesty. So that's something which also we benefit from. And that's most of the stuff which is there. But there's different meanings of sahun that we can take, and this is how we try and understand this. And then another thing, alladina hum yura'un. So we had sahun and his salah, and yura'un, this can carry on and be directly linked to salah, or it can be general. But yura'un, it will be specific to good deeds. It's not going to be yura'un in anything bad. So yura'un, either we link it directly to salat, or we link it generally. So now somebody, ra'a means to try very hard. It's from mufa'ala, when you try to make somebody else see. So now you go the extra mile to make sure other people are going to see this good deed. So when you're going to put money in the charity box, you make sure everybody's there. So everybody can hear the noise, and they'll all look, oh, he's put money in the charity box. So something like that. Or a person is praying and he takes out a bit of extra time to, when somebody else walks in, then the ruku is a bit better and the sajda is a bit. So that's what yura'un means. Specifically, take out time to show somebody else. And this is, obviously, if you go back to the Quraysh, because most scholars say this is all about the Quraysh, and the whole surah was revealed in Makkah. So how does this apply to the Quraysh? Well, because they were, as we know, Rabba Hadha al-Bayt, they were the custodians of the Kaaba. And you have to be pious. So if the Kaaba only has a value because you have gods there, because of religion. Otherwise it's not really that important, and there's no value of the Quraysh. So because of their religion, now if they don't act pious, if they don't pretend to be very, very godly and pious and always praying, then people aren't going to value them that much. People aren't going to give them trade deals, and people aren't going to be that scared of them. So this is one thing we noticed from the Quraysh, that they would act overly pious because they have to keep the trade deals, and their main selling point is the fact that they are the most sacred place on earth. And this is what Surah Fil established, and that's why that meant so much to them, that Allah destroyed the elephants, and that means that they're very, very sacred people, that Allah doesn't want them to be destroyed. The house is very sacred, so the people looking after the house, they're very pious and sacred as well. So they have to put on that show, and for a whole of, whenever Hajj season would come, they'd put on a whole show for these people. So alladhina hum yura'un, this could apply to the Quraysh. More importantly, for us, we don't need to know about the Quraysh, but ourselves, is that we ourselves, we also need to understand how it affects us. So then when we pray, how do we pray, where should we pray, and do we pray for other people? So this is something which we have to check. And it's not possible for me or any of us to judge anybody else. This is something which we can only judge for ourselves. So we never try and judge anybody else, but we always try and make something which is solely for the sake of Allah. This is one solution, that on a daily basis we're doing something. Maybe it's 2 rakats, maybe it's some Quran, maybe it's some charity, but something, because obviously if you come to the mosque regularly, then that salah everybody will see it. That doesn't mean that it's your own, but it means that everybody will see it. So we should have something as well in our life, in our timetable, that is solely for the sake of Allah, which nobody knows about. Just like sometimes if you want to do a certain sin, we don't go and do it publicly, we do it privately. So we try and find that same privacy for our good deeds sometimes as well. That's something which will help us really connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, sometimes we need to show as well. So sometimes the hadith says that لا تجعلوا بيوتكم qubura. Don't make your houses, so we pray the fard in the masjid. Sometimes we can pray the nafil and the witr and the sunan all at home. And there's many hadith for this, because so we can show our children and our wives as well. The wives are never going to think that we're good, are they? But especially our children, so we can become a role model for the children, so they can see us praying, and this is important as well. So that's one thing we can do. And by praying at home, this would not be yura'un, obviously. This is to create an environment in the house. And the Prophet ﷺ said that try and pray in your house, otherwise it becomes like a graveyard. So that's something we also benefit from. And we just quickly move on to the last one. وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَعُونَ. And وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَعُونَ. يَمْنَعُ is to withhold, to not give. Ma'un generally means something very basic. So we'll come to that meaning. For example, in today's society, a pen, for example. So imagine if I had a pen and brother needed you to sign something or wanted to write something, and he asked, can I borrow your pen? And I said no, for no genuine reason. If it was a normal biro pen, yeah. So for example, or in that time, somebody asks you for water. Somebody's going past and they want some water, or somebody wants some salt. It's very cheap salt. Things like this, or it could even be things which don't diminish at all. So the pen, the ink goes less. The water, it diminishes to some extent. The salt goes less. But like somebody wants to use a bucket. Somebody wants to use, if the tire goes flat, somebody wants to inflate their tire and use your inflator. Again, it doesn't diminish your bucket or your tire inflator in any way. But still, that's what ma'un is. Somebody doesn't give you ma'un, that's what kind of person they are. Now this is worse than being a miser. It's worse than bukhl in Arabic. Because in bukhl, okay, I don't want to give you money, so I keep money. It's just you don't want to see somebody else happy. It's a very evil quality to have. And it's real hard-heartedness. And this is something which would happen in the people of Makkah. And even there's many narrations as to why this was revealed and who it was revealed to. But many Sahaba would see ma'un even as zakat. Why? Because zakat is only 140. There's only 2.5%. So it's such a small amount. So if somebody ma'un of such a small amount as well, so how stingy is this person? If Allah only asks for 2.5% and a person can't even give that. So the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they would refer to even zakat as ma'un, something very, very small, something very basic. It's not hard to give your 2.5%. And obviously zakat only applies to people who are relatively rich or wealthy. They have some disposable income. So that's why Sahaba would refer to zakat as ma'un as well. Generally, the yamna'un al-ma'un, most of us, alhamdulillah, would not be like that. If somebody asks you for a pen, you give it. A normal person wouldn't deny it. But what had happened to the Quraysh, they'd become so hard that if somebody poor didn't have a bucket and the neighbor wanted to use it, they wouldn't give it to them. If somebody wanted something normal, a little bit of ink, a little bit of salt, they wouldn't feel that they want to help them in any way, because they were a class above. It's a kind of a result of arrogance, and this is why it comes after your own. So a person, he shows everybody, he wants to show and have some arrogance, and it causes these kind of things inside their lives. And even in this country, for example, we know that if you go into a restaurant, you're allowed to ask for tap water and they have to give it to you. It's things like this. If somebody doesn't do that, they are considered quite strange. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the ability. Obviously there's a lot of emphasis on salah, and there's a lot of emphasis on ikhlas and sincerity. So may Allah give us the ability to understand these directly from His words.